What is going on, everyone? This is Eric coming at you from just outside of Hartford, Connecticut. And today we're going to look at the Randy Moss trade, which occurred back in March of 2005 on March 2nd. Now, this trade gets a little messy because there's essentially three teams that are constantly involved in it. So we'll start off with the original trade. So the original trade saw the Oakland Raiders acquire wide receiver Randy Moss from the Minnesota Vikings in exchange for a pair of 2005 draft picks, the 7th and 219th overall, respectively, as well as a linebacker. So how did this trade work out? We will start with Oakland, and Oakland got wide receiver Randy Moss, obviously. So Randy Moss, he would underachieve over 2 years while in Oakland. He just didn't do that well. And he was dealing with numerous nagging injuries that just continuously slowed him down no matter what. Now, he was clearly unhappy about being in Oakland. He was fed up with it, and he actually openly complained to the media. So this saw him get traded. Now, unfortunately for him, his value was low, but he didn't care. So he gets traded straight up to the New England Patriots in exchange for a 2007 fourth-round pick, the 110th overall selection. With that pick, the Oakland Raiders would select cornerback John Bowie, and Bowie dealt with numerous injuries over 3 years while playing in Oakland, and he was only a special teamer over those 3 years before being cut. Not that great for Oakland. Now we go to the Minnesota Vikings, and this is where it gets a little weird. I'm going to have to break up Minnesota. You'll see why. So with the 7th overall selection, Minnesota would select wide receiver Troy Williamson, obviously hoping to replace Randy Moss. And Williamson the problem was with him, he never developed over 3 years in Minnesota. He wasn't horrible, but he just wasn't worthy of the 7th overall selection. Now, he ends up getting traded, and they would trade him to the Jacksonville Jaguars in exchange for the 193rd pick in the 2008 NFL Draft. So with that 193rd pick, the Minnesota Vikings would select wide receiver Jamar Johnson. And Jamar Johnson, he was a 1-year practice squad player before making the team, and essentially was just a punt returner in his second year, and then he ends up getting cut. So next, we have the 219th pick, which the Vikings used on cornerback Adrian Ward. And Adrian Ward never made the team. He got cut, and he never played a snap in the NFL. Lastly, we have the linebacker Napoleon Harris. And Napoleon Harris had a quiet year 1 in Minnesota before having a solid second year as a starter before leaving the team. So decent player, just kind of Minnesota saying we need help in linebacker. So not horrible. Now, Minnesota's involved later on. We'll get to that in a minute. So we're going to go with New England here. So the New England Patriots were the team that got Randy Moss from the Oakland Raiders in exchange for a 4th-round pick. Now, the 2007 Patriots are one of, if not the best team in NFL history. Now, obviously, they didn't win the Super Bowl, but they did go 16-0 and eventually made it to 18-0 before losing in the Super Bowl to the Giants. But that doesn't matter here because Randy Moss really helped that team. So he had an elite year in 2007, proving that Tom Brady with an elite receiver was a lethal combination. Now, he had a strong 2008 and another strong year in 2009 where he actually led the NFL in touchdowns. Now, he gets traded after 4 games in 2010 due to a lack of playing time. He was upset. So during his stint in New England, he was a 2-time touchdown leader of the NFL, 1-time Pro Bowler, 1-time first-team All-Pro, and a 1-time comeback player of the year. And of course, that was 2007. So very, very successful, very good pickup for the Patriots. Now, they would trade him along with a 2012 7th-round pick to the Minnesota Vikings in exchange for a 2011 3rd-round pick. Now, that 3rd-round pick that New England got would be the 74th overall selection, and with that pick, they would select quarterback Ryan Mallett. Now, Ryan Mallett spent 3 years as a backup in New England, and he didn't see much playing time. Obviously, when you're behind Tom Brady, you're not going to see much playing time at all, and he ends up getting traded. So they would trade him to the Houston Texans in exchange for a 2015 conditional 6th-round pick. Now, for the first time in the trade breakdown series, the conditions of the pick were not met. Therefore, New England got nothing for Ryan Mallett. So, yeah. So now we're back to the Minnesota Vikings. And Minnesota would get Randy Moss as well as that 2012 7th rounder. So stint 2 for Randy Moss in Minnesota wasn't as good. So he just struggled and did not get along with his head coach, who I believe at that time was Brad Childress. And he ends up getting waived after only 4 games. So, yeah. And then that 2012 7th round pick would become the 223rd selection, and they would trade it to Detroit along with pick 138 for pick 219 and a 2013 4th rounder. So, that 2012 pick 219, Minnesota would select defensive end Trevor Guyton, and he did not make the team, so he's kind of irrelevant. Now, the 2013 pick, 4th round pick, would be 102nd overall. Now, this pick gets traded, and we're not going to discuss it just because at this point in time, Minnesota is considered a secondary team in the trade, as weird as it sounds. They were a primary team, but at this point, they're a secondary team, so we're not going to go into it. So, that leaves a couple teams. That leaves Detroit, Jacksonville, and Houston. And we'll start with the Jaguars. So, they were the team that got wide receiver Troy Williamson from the Minnesota Vikings. And Williamson caught 8 passes over 2 years before being cut. So obviously, definitely not worth a 7th overall pick by Minnesota. Both teams just struggled with him. He didn't really figure it out. Houston got quarterback Ryan Mallett. And Ryan Mallett struggled whenever he would start. And he was cut after just 1 season in Houston. So a wash of a trade again. Lastly, we have the Detroit Lions. And they had the 2 2012 picks. So with the 138th selection, they would go with linebacker Tahil Whitehead. And Whitehead was actually a pretty solid pick for Detroit. He was his first 2 years, I should say, he was a backup and a special teamer before becoming the starting middle linebacker for the team in 2014 and playing well. Now, he would spend another few years in Detroit as a starter before walking. Pretty solid pick for Detroit. Now, that 223rd pick they would use on another linebacker named Travis Lee. And Travis Lee was a key special teamer for 4 years in Detroit before leaving. Now, this is one of those rare trades where there's no clear winner from the original trade. Oakland and Minnesota both just didn't get much out of it. And the further you go, New England's probably the clear winner of this trade. Minnesota probably did a little better than Oakland did. And I also like what Detroit got. Other than that, everyone else was kind of a wash. So, hope you guys enjoyed this. This was the Randy Moss trade. Have a good rest of your day.